Hey, the purpose of this video is to give the late March trolling report in the Flat Creek and the Balus Creek areas of Lake Lanier. And I want to encourage everybody to pray before you go fishing, because in these difficult transition periods, we can all use a little more help from Jesus.
There is a Redeemer, Jesus, God's own Son. Precious Lamb of God, Messiah, Holy One.
Okay, so when I launched at Balus Creek Park, I was a little disappointed that the water was colder than I was expecting, close to 54 degrees. And after seeing it close to 60 degrees last week in Big Creek, I was hoping the temperature would be closer to 58 degrees. But when it's 54 degrees, you got to fish anyway, so we headed on out. First thing we did was we tooled up Balus Creek a little ways to the point marked A on the map, and we started setting out our lures. I got all the lures set out. If you recall, we trolled 9 lures at a time, and mostly at this point we were trolling them about 10 feet down. And our 9 lure spread had 4 Michigan Stinger spoons, a couple of Captain Max chipmunk jigs with the yellow twisty tails, a mixed stick pro 110, and we also had, what was it, the other lures out there? We had a Berkeley Frenzy, and we had a larger Michigan Stinger spoon. So that's our trolling spread. We go from point A to point B, and that area goes from about 30 to 40 feet of water in the creek channel as you're heading up Balus Creek, and we're headed out of Balus Creek in the direction we were going. And there we marked a little bait, but not a whole lot of bait and not so much fish. It looked really promising. Then it got a little promising on the sonar from B to C. We just didn't happen to hook up. But that's a pretty steep slope there from B to C, and the creek channel of Balus Creek goes from 40 to 60 to 80 feet really quickly. We were marking plenty of bait really from 10 feet down to about 20 feet down. But we just headed across Balus Creek from point C to point D. We didn't go in a straight line from C to D. We headed up back toward the boat ramp, and we were searching the contours on that northern bank of Balus Creek, saying, hey, is there a depth or a contour where we can see more bait or we can see more fish? And the answer really was no. Just didn't seem to be marking much at all in Balus Creek. But when we rounded the bend between D and E and we start heading up Flat Creek, that's when things got a little more interesting. We could mark more bait on the sonar, not tons of bait, and the bait was kind of in 2 categories. There were some big clouds that were spread from 5 feet down to 40 feet, and then there were some more organized smaller balls of bait, more between 10 and 20 feet, and we had a hit on the mixed stick not too long after we passed point E. Started headed up to point F, more or less in a straight line, but more toward the sort of the southeast bank there, and marking just sporadic bait, sporadic fish, not tons, not anything that screams, hey, turn around and keep fishing in this area until they bite, because they're all here. But enough to kind of have a sense that it was interesting. Headed up from point F to point G, and point G is what I call the narrows there. That's the spot where Flat Creek goes through that little narrow area. It's about 70 feet deep right there. And then as you head from point G to point H, that's the broad flat area. You've got a lot of water there that's about 50 feet deep. Through the narrows, we were marking both fish and bait. It looked real interesting. There were other boats. We were trolling lures. There were other boats slow trolling, blueback herring, it looked like, on free lines and down lines, lots of planer boards out. They were hooking up with some striped bass in that area close to G. But between G and H, we really weren't marking very much. So, after one pass between G and H and then back to G, We didn't go up into that area at all because it just looked more interesting in the area of Flat Creek between E and G. So we headed back toward Point E, still marking lots of fish. Didn't hook up until we turned around, and then we're headed back to Point F. And about 5:30, that's when the spotted bass, close to 4 pounds, ends up hitting the Spro Mixed Stick 110, close to a blueback herring color, and that's when we put that big pig of a spotted bass in the boat. And the details there, that one was caught, I estimate the lure was probably close to between 15 and 20 feet down. It was on lead core. We used lead core, 180 feet of lead core, and then a long 30-pound fluorocarbon leader, and then the lure. And it hit, and we managed to get that one to the boat. But kind of a slow afternoon overall, which wasn't a big surprise given the water temperatures. Even when we got to way up in Flat Creek, close to Point H, the water was only about 56 degrees. So last March at this time, I was keeping careful records. We caught another pig of a spotted bass, similar trolling techniques, about the same time last year. But last March, by this time, the temperature up there in Flat Creek was already 58 degrees. So I had thought that this spring that the water temperatures would warm a little before, warm a little faster than last spring. But it looks like the pace is comparable, or maybe the spring warm up this year might be happening just a little bit slower.
I tremble at the thought of Judgment Day. Lord, I am not ready. Please don't return just yet, for all my sins are put away. My cross is on the floor, and I would burn.